1, 2, 3, 4.
2025 has been interesting in how much I've changed a lot as a content creator. I've learned a lot both as making art, but also being able to create interesting and entertaining content. In my mission of improving myself, I made it clear to make an album in the span of 30 days. Even if it's not officially on streaming, I wanted to challenge myself as a musician and as someone who writes a lot. In the course of these past 30 days, I made one of the most interesting pieces of work that I've ever done, and I want to talk about it here on this very channel. Hello, if you don't know me, my name is Arnel Arcega. I'm one of the healthiest content creators out there in making sure I get things done that I want and achieving the goals that I desire. In my journey of not only improving my communication skills, I've also wanted to tap into the world of music. I love music as much as the next person. It's the idea of creating chords and moving them all across the board, whether going from an E to a C minor to even stuff like F sharp and B sharp. To some extent, yes, there are many ways to look at music terminology, and in the course of this past month, I wanted to make an album. Therefore, I wrote 10 songs, all about love, plastic, and other weird things, and I'm going to talk about it here before we move any further. Let's talk about the concept of this album. I started this work out when I was bored on a snow day. I wanted to write some sort of music, and when I thought about the general premise of an album, I wanted it to be clear and cohesive. Obviously not to my all-time favorites, but you can see the type of music I listen to checking out my album of the year account down the link in the description. For now though, I do want to focus on all the things I do in music. I like moving it from major to the minor chords very well, but making sure I can get across each board. And when I was bored by itself, I decided to write music. It's not impossible for anyone to do this for this craft, but when I started writing, I wanted it to be unique. So I started with an E, moved it to a G sharp, into an A, and a B. I kept this same pattern until I came up with the first song of the album. I'm eating plastic and I know it's not the best. Obviously, I don't have the best singing talent. What I do have is a passion to make genuine and real music. I want to be able to tell something serious, but make it in a very kiddish tone. That's why I made the song I'm Eating Plastic the way it is. It's one of my favorite songs in terms of chords, as I went a lot of directions here, going from the C, the C minor into yeah, it comes back in memory, and to say the least, I genuinely think that's one of the coolest things about music. Obviously, I don't have anything on my plate, but what I am is a kid willing to learn and willing to change the way I view music. I'll play the album in parts of it in the background, but as you hear over the course of this video, I genuinely came up with something that I'm proud of. And it was the first song that I really thought about. When I shared it to my friends, they really thought of it as a kid's song, and I went back and additionally added stuff like bass and drums. Overall, I think I'm Eating Plastic is a great way to start the album, and it helped me learn in a lot of ways how to not only form an album, but also how to make it clear and concise in the manner that I want. The next song is Maybe I'm Amazed, the second track of the album. As I wanted this album to be fully focused on things such as love and plastic, I covered the plastic pretty obviously in that first song. When I came up with Maybe I'm Amazed, I was heavily inspired by the Paul McCartney song, but when I came up with the chords, it was a whole different story. I took about the same E-flat idea, but I took the same melodies as some of my favorite music inspirations. Case in point, to Pure from 2024. I took their song My God and used it into forming the A into the suspended sound. Yeah, there you go. That's how it sounds like. Overall, I came up with Maybe I'm Amazed as a super sweet melody. And as you can see in the song, I genuinely think it's one of the favorites that will stand out if you were to listen to it. Obviously, this video comes with the additional idea that you've listened to the album, but regardless, it's one of the most cheeky songs I made, and I've learned quite a lot since then. I loved seeing the progression of the album, as you can see me add more musical influences in my work. Obviously, it's gonna go for that indie folk, indie pop direction, but I still want to add things like alternative rock and other elements alike. My main thing I wanted to focus on is catchy melodies, but also simple yet easily infectious messages. And that's what I came up with in Maybe I'm Amazed. Probably my favorite cut on the whole album, rivaled by a later cut you'll see and explain. The third song on my album, Chords and Beats, is Majesty. This one was one I recorded really fast. I didn't think much about it, but I came up with the idea when I kept messing with the A sharp chord and the G chord. As I kept messing with both of those, I eventually came up with the main melody, made it sharp, witty, and fast, and overall, I came up with something I'm pretty satisfied with. It's one of the few songs that, like Maybe I'm Amazed, keeps on impressing me every time I come back to it. It's because of how much elements I add while keeping it simple that it makes my music feel timeless as I've listened to it. I love being able to create music that is mostly targeted towards a younger audience without it losing the presence of love or the theme of plastic, as you can see. I wrote in my notes somewhere about the main themes of every song on this album, and the main thing I said about Majesty was simply how it is affected by someone being greater than yourself. As I quote myself, calling out someone for their mistakes until they get nothing at all. You can see this very well in the music and several lines that indicate towards that. It's different being a creator of music as someone who made the album over being a reviewer. For most of my life, I reviewed other people's music, but being able to create something that I've made, it's hard to be objective, but also subjective. I still had a lot of fun making these tracks, and I made this back to back with Maybe I'm Amazed. So it has a lot of musical and tonal similarities, but overall it stands out by itself, and the more I add to it, the better it becomes. Track 4, Polythene Pam, is probably the first track that I'd say I didn't do as proud as I wish I could. In a lot of ways, this is easily the weakest cut in my opinion, but if you listen to it, that's great. Some people I know said this is one of the stronger cuts, but for me personally, this was the hardest song to make. Not in the fact that it was directly hard, but I think it was just the melody. I took a lot of inspiration from some of my favorite artists, such as Neutral Milk Hotel or David Bowie, or in those cases, a lot of acoustic cuts from the Beatles. As I tried to make melodies going in that sharp range, it was really hard trying to figure out the tonal differences I wanted to get out of here. I don't know music theory as much, but I know chord progressions, and going from that G sharp into the C sharp, into the A sharp, into the D sharp. I also took a lot of inspiration from Led Zeppelin's Ramble On with its own bridging suspended notes, and overall I think this is one of the most unique cuts. I just don't like my singing on it. I could have improved on it, but alas, it is the way it is, and I'd say it's a great, solid piece, but definitely on the weaker side. Side A closes with my favorite cut on maybe the entire album, Dance Potion Man. This is the one where I actually felt the most pleased with as an artist. I love how this song came together, and I love just how energized I sound on it, and how colorful the whole song feels. It's, in my messages, probably the darkest song I wrote here. In terms of messaging, I explicitly wrote that Dance Potion Man is all about a politician trying to change the world in the case of power. The irony of the line Dance Potion Man is just that. It's trying to force this guy to dance, even though does he really deserve it more than anyone else here? It's a hard topic to cover, but I'd say it closes the first half very strong. I considered the first half mostly made up of acoustic cuts that I made purely on my guitar. Anyone with a good amount of chord progression and music skills can do this. I know for certain there are people out there with so much better music talent than me. They can sing better, play better, but I did what I can. And overall, as an artist, I'm genuinely pleased with how this came out. And it's one of my favorite chord progressions as I began finger picking it. As I played, it goes. It's very similar to that one New Job is cut off of his album Metaphorical Music. It's super sunny, very energetic and playful. And overall, I'd say it's one of my favorite cuts that I've made as an artist in terms of lyricism, but also musicality. The second half of Chords and Beats starts off with Title Sequence, probably one of my favorite cuts in terms of having more collaboration. As you can tell probably on the whole album, I started this off and made this all by myself. With the help of my friend Fairlex, she played the drums for this one track. Everything else, I made the drums using my keyboard and also the bass using my bass over here. I wanted to make it super simple as I didn't want this album to be overly complex. What I ended up making is a rip-off of System of a Down's Aerials, but sharing that music knowledge is great in having me not only get better as a musician, but also appreciate how I can create something short but sweet. It's what someone like Sabrina Carpenter would do, but in the lens of a 16-year-old boy. If I consider that, then I'd say this album is a slam dunk. Title Sequence is an ironic cut that feels middling to a certain degree, but still very much along the lines of everything else. Still about plastic, still about love, somewhat about politics, but overall just enjoying life as is and taking it less as a game. Title Sequence transitions into the 7th song on the album, again, the Ballad, which is easily maybe the best song on the whole album from an objective lens. I asked many of my friends this in a Google poll, and they all told me this was their favorite song. In terms of lyricism, this is the one that I remember making during the last few weeks of school before the break, and I genuinely believe this is one of the happiest things that I've made. I wrote it inspired off of a friend that I've had in middle school. After our falling out, it didn't feel as right, and I genuinely miss her for the life of me. But this is a way to remember and honestly think back to those memories of middle school without losing the feeling of hope and distress. It's all about generating something beautiful, and that's what I believe music is about. When I created something like Again, it made me feel so energized, and I love it for that case. It may be whack in the production, but it is easily my favorite song on the whole album because of just how genuine, earnest, and real it is. And with the rise of AI and constant barrage of social media, we want people to attach to, and by doing that, we have to be genuine and real to our audience. Not be mysterious, not try to overly explain things. We just have to be there when we need. And again, does that not only for you, but also for me. The Love of My Life was originally written for a friend of mine. It was gonna be a different title, entirely based off of the Green Day song Give Me Novocaine, but as I progressively moved on the album, it became a lot more polarizing and complex. This is by far the most complex song on the whole album. I'd say my favorite part on this whole thing is the bridge halfway through, in which we're having a lot of these jazzy chords blocked out by the extra pinky. You get the idea. It's something along those lines in which we're able to balance the simple and the complex. Usually on my main channel, I talk about authors, writings, and all kinds of things, and complex doesn't equal good. But at the same time, complex is like the extra frosting on a donut or the extra cream on ice cream. When you think about those extra pieces, it feels redundant, but if done right, it is beautiful. And I made one of my favorite parts of the whole album when I created those pieces. And that alone helped me create one of my favorite songs on the whole project. I know it's so hard to sound not biased, but I do believe this is one thing where I'm genuinely satisfied with this whole album. And it's less of me educating you guys on what it is, what the story is all about, but rather just how I feel about it. I had to share this to the world, and I genuinely love what I created here. And I hope this gives you the inspiration to create something of your own. Case in point, the final song off of the album is a song called Venetucci Drive, which is easily the longest song on the whole album. I wanted to tap into my inner Radiohead, or that Jeff Buckley drive to experiment with chord progressions and timed signatures. So I took the simple E chord, the power chord, the sharp, and then we ended on with an A. we repeat this over and over for the first half of the song in multiple different ways, whether that's in the main 4/4 or we go into 6/8. 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6 1 2 3 4 5 6. There's a lot of cool music terminology here, additionally with time signatures along with other things, but I'd say it feels powerful enough just listening to it by itself. I don't want to speak for the art as art stands by itself, but I just want to give you context on how I made it all. There's any fancy technology. I'm using the mic that I speak into with all these videos as a recording piece, and then using that I just record myself off of my phone. So this whole album was recorded on my phone, and that's already better than a lot of artists who try to overproduce things or don't add enough. I feel this is strong as a work by itself, and while I feel this is one of those exhausting pieces of work, I came up with something absolutely beautiful, and I'm super satisfied with it. To create music, it was hard by myself, as there wasn't anyone who was on the same wavelength as me, or someone who shared the same interest as me in creating this kind of indie folk, indie pop kind of music. And that led me to all my inspirations as you listen through it. I want to be able to not only collaborate with future musicians, but expand myself not just as an author, but as a writer and a creator. And I genuinely believe music is one way to do that. I may not have the best singing skills, but I can tell you I know music knowledge, I know how the progressions work, and I know how to write interesting melodies that captivate audiences. Case in point, the real final song of the album is a song called A Death of a Friend. This isn't literal by any chance, but when you consider things such as love, plastic, and other weird things, this album has to end on a big, gigantic note, and that's what I did with The Death of a Friend. I just want to play the final few minutes at the end here because it's one of the most powerful moments I've heard as a musician and makes me appreciate how it is. In the case of making this, I actually used over 50 instruments from my keyboard behind the camera over there. I used my keyboard to the best of my ability, and I added things such as a tuba, a violin, flutes, etc. I didn't want to replace it over real instruments, but when I make more music in the future, I'm telling you, I will use real instruments like that and expand on my craft much further. For now, if there's one part of the album I highly suggest you check out, it's just this final moment here. It's so beautiful. What did we learn from this all? It's less educational than I like, but I want to use this as a way to talk about this channel, what I want to do in the future, and what I've learned as a creator. I am still young. I'm 16 years old as of recording this. I don't have much music talent, but I also know how it's like being someone still getting to the top. It may be better to see someone like me who is maybe on the same level as you who don't know how to make music. In the case of my older videos on this channel, who don't know how to socialize or make any kind of meaningful connections. That's why I'm here to do music and any kind of piece that allows me to talk about problems I have with the world. We all have a way of chasing gratification, delaying all the hard work, and in particular, we just do the easy things that we don't try and experiment. This whole music thing was a risk for me as a creator, as I know it wouldn't last very long. If I envision my future, I can see myself making another Chords and Beats, 2, maybe 3. But afterward, I would have to call it quits unless someone is there willing to help me create another album. So I hope that with this video in mind, I can not only use this channel as a way to expand on my music. I've been wanting to create music for a long time, but also use more elements to talk about social skills, talk about things people can improve on. I like being educational, but I also like creating art and a business. That's what I want. I want to balance both the free-minded, the smart thinking way of making money, but also making artistic efforts to create a legacy. In order to change how things are, you have to appreciate what you have now. And the case of music is one thing, because after a while, things such as AI and plastic ideas come to mind. And that's why I made Chords and Beats as a whole. So, I hope you enjoyed today's video discussing me ramble on about my album. And I'm excited to do more music. If you're willing to work with me, then check out my Instagram down in the link in the description. And if you're curious about the album, it's on YouTube. It may not be on Spotify or any music platform, but I made an earnest, genuine project and I simply want to talk about it here. Think of it as a director's cut. Until then, always remember that you are loved and appreciated. And until next time, keep on working, keep on communicating, and take care.